And that's the great part about working with kids and teenagers is I think we have to teach them to be good consumers of information. We're in we talked about the state of the world, anti-science in many ways, actively anti-science and pseudoscience and the things that we see. That part of the work I think has to be, how do you consume? What do you consume? Where do you get your information? How do you consume it? And asking questions of who's providing that information.
I'm from a family where part of my family's background said you don't talk to strangers about your mental health matters. That's what family or religious officials within the faith can do. And people if we don't get out and reach parents and kids, they are missing a golden opportunity to potentially get help and redirect their entire trajectory with the right person at the right time.
Not everybody has ADHD, not everybody has OCD, not everybody has #trauma. And so that's the thing that's a pet peeve of mine, that it's sort of watering down the real clinical stuff and making it seem as if, it's much more pervasive or much more diagnosed and things like that. And so I worry about that kind of messaging.
All emotions, I think, have an adaptive purpose. You just have to figure out what it's asking me to do rather than let it overwhelm you. And if you're not careful, it can overwhelm you, and then that can spiral. But if you actually do what you said and say, okay, what's it driving me to do? You can be quite creative.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Addy Hour podcast. I appreciate all the love you all are continuing to show to the podcast. And as usual, I'm just honored to be able to host these dynamic conversations. Definitely keep liking the episodes, sharing comments, sharing them with your friends, because that will continue to help us to spread just the word in these important conversations as well. And I know I say this every week, but again, this is another one that's a really special episode. Many reasons I'm saying that. One, because we're going to be able to lean into this topic of really thinking about how we think about our relationship with mental health as a society. So something that's really important. But the other reason that I'm really excited is because of the two individuals that I have here with me in the studio. These are two folks who've really been at the forefront of how we think about, talk about, and approach mental health as a society. So I know we're going to have a really enriching conversation. But the other reason that I'm really excited is these are two people who I consider dear friends, who are also mentors, who've been with me in many ways since day one, when I really started to get my feet into this whole idea of talking more publicly about neuroscience, mental health, faith, culture, and social justice. So they've really facilitated a lot of what we've been able to do on this podcast, maybe in ways they don't even realize, just in the ways they've invested in me. So I'm honored in that sense to be able to share them with all of you and share their insights as well. So I think you're really going to enjoy everything they have to share in this conversation today as well. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce my first guest, Dr. Simon Rago, who is joining us here today. Dr. Rago is someone who is a licensed clinical psychologist, 25 years of experience in cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT, and in other evidence-based psychological treatments. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. And I'm not, just due to time, I don't have time to go into all of his different leadership roles and accolades, but I'm going to give you all a taste of who he is. So he has served in many different roles. He has made different leadership roles. One that I just want to highlight, he's also been a board member of two specific organizations that, again, have been at the forefront of these types of conversations. So the board of directors for the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies and the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. He served on both those boards. He also found different boards in New York City as well. So he's someone who has really had his hand in a lot of different things, so to speak. But just to give you a sense of his expertise, it includes specialties around assessment and treatment of anxiety, stress, obsessive compulsive related disorders, but also depression, insomnia, and body-focused repetitive behaviors. That's things like compulsive hair pulling, skin picking, and those types of challenges. But not only that, he's someone who shares his knowledge widely. So he's also written multiple books, one on obsessive compulsive disorder, another one on what he called the 10-step depression relief workbook, another one that was a workbook for mental health, and more recently, one on panic disorder and agoraphobia. Now, as if that wasn't enough, he also spends a lot of time speaking with the media, whether that's on television, places like CNN, CBS, ABC, MSNBC, Fox News, whether that's in print media, whether that's on the radio. So in a lot of ways, we're honored and privileged that we actually were able to pull him from all those different things to actually be here on this podcast. So with that, let me go ahead again and welcome Dr. Simon Rago to the Addy Hour podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having us having me on. And I appreciate the very generous introduction. It was very kind to you.
Of course. It's generous and it's true. So it's a good combination.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
My second guest is Dr. Sandy Pimentel, who I think I met around the same time. Dr. Pimentel is someone who, again, has a lot of accolades. So similarly, I'm not going to go through all of them, but just to give you a sense of who she is, she's currently Chief of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and also Associate Director of Psychology Training at Montefiore Medical Center and also the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. She's someone who also has had a lot of different roles. One that I just wanted to highlight. Previously, she was the Associate Director of the Columbia University Clinic for Anxiety and Related Disorders. So again, gives you a little bit of a sense of some of what she's done. She's also had very large leadership roles in some pivotal organizations around some of these topics. We may get into some of that as well. But in terms of her specialties, she does specialize also in cognitive behavioral therapy, but specifically for children, adolescents, and young adults with anxiety, mood, and behavioral difficulties. The other thing that's really impressive is she takes a very comprehensive approach where she engages both in individual and group therapy, but also in family therapy as well. Sandy is someone who really has a heart for teaching advanced training, and she focuses both on education and mentorship, and also makes sure that she disseminates that information widely for people to be able to have access to these evidence-based interventions. She also does that through lots of different professional training workshops, and she's also involved in various organizations within the city as well. And one thing that I remember years back, she invited me to be part of a group that was related to, I think, interfaith approaches to just impacting the city in a whole bunch of different ways. And I was really grateful for the opportunity she gave me to connect with people in that way. And I know I've only given you all a taste. I don't know if I did it justice because there's so many other things that you've been involved in. But Sandy, thanks so much for being here on the Addy Hour podcast.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. Pleasure to be here with you and my buddy Simon.
Yeah. And I was telling you all beforehand as well, in some ways this is a miracle to have both of you in the same room in New Haven, Connecticut at the same time, knowing your schedules and your impact. But as I always do, I just like to start in checking in and seeing how you all are doing. So Simon, can I start with you?
It's a tough question these days. Do you start with the hard ones?
Yeah.
You make it sound so easy. In this moment, I'm enjoying myself being here with you and Sandy and two good friends and people who really inspire me to do good work. And maybe that's the way I try to think about life these days is it's a lesson from my children to really try to be mindful and show gratitude about where I am moment to moment without letting my mind try to stretch too far ahead or go back in time. So I think that's how I've tried to manage life is just to try to be present in the moment. And in this moment, I feel good.
Yeah.
Excited.
Yeah. That's great to hear. And you're already teaching all of us lessons. Because that's such an important framework. And we do say it all the time, but I feel like it's so easy to forget.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. Sandy, what about you?
Good. Simon and I were joking in the parking lot that we had to come to New Haven to actually see each other in person, despite our offices being a couple of blocks apart.
Right.
We're on Zooms all the time,
I'm sure.
It's nice to get a moment with him and with you. Same, it's a tough world. I think if you pay attention to the news, how they affect us in different levels, systematic dismantling of rights and whatnot. So I think similarly, I try to stay focused in the moment. I am from New Jersey, so chronically rageful as a baseline, but also stubbornly hopeful. I work with kids, and when you spend some time with them, they sort of give a lot of hope for what's to come and their perspective on things. And so a lot of good things going on and trying to hang out in that. It's baseball season. It's, I start playing softball next week. I'm trying to catch up to Simon with his books. Just turned in a manuscript for a book.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so, trying to focus on the positive aspects of things. Got some family time on the weekend, which is always a plus.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Well, I appreciate the way that you both answered that question. It's already framing, I feel like, just the way that so many of us have to think about how we navigate and maybe not even celebrate and live day to day. So yeah, you can tell I'm even reflecting on what you both said. I'm trying to take all those pieces in. So the other thing I know that when we were, preparing for this conversation, there's so many different directions we could go. And I feel like the topics I gave you all are all big. And I'm going to do something which I know is not good to do as a podcast host, but I'm actually going to start with a yes or no question, which I usually try not to do. But just in this context of, again, thinking about how we as a society think about mental health, as I was kind of reflecting on, one thing that came to mind was, is this a fad or is this trending? Just because of how the mental health conversation has moved at so many different times, where is it the in thing to do? Is it something to avoid? So again, not good to ask a yes or no question, but I'll let you elaborate. But just from your perspective, I'll say it in two ways, both as a community member who lives in the communities like we all do, but then also in your expertise. How would you answer that? Is mental health a fad? Simon, you look like you're ready to start.
I was going to tease you saying that's not exactly yes or no. You opened up two lanes of possibility, trend or fad, right? And I think it's hard to tell at any one point. It's again, back to being mindful. It's hard to distinguish now. History is going to tell us a little bit, right?
Okay.
Things have to play out before we decide whether it was a fad or whether it started a trend. I can tell you my hope.
Okay, let's go there.
I don't think it's going to be a surprise if I say that I'm hoping it's a trend. We're seeing the right people in the right places. Some of whom have been guests on your show. Open the door, cast a light on the topic, and try to be leading voices in normalizing the experience of mental health struggles. And I actually think that's been pretty remarkable. So you could call it a fad in that it has a pretty sharp junction point in the last half decade, I think. And I don't know how long it takes before you'd say it's a trend. I think maybe Sandy will have some ideas that I can bounce off of, but I have some worries still, given the way the lenses move around so quickly. But at this point in time, I think it seems to have more momentum than I can remember in my career, where more people are talking about it with an open mind and seeking help.
That's really well said. Sandy, anything you want to add or even bounce off of?
By and large, I love it, honestly.
Okay.
I think I have my worries in terms of we're overwhelmed by so much information. And so I worry about the false information, the distorted information that we see on social media. And there's data to back that up, that mental health is maybe not being portrayed as, directly as it should be or honestly as it should be. But by and large, we have athletes and celebrities and teams sponsoring mental health programs. And that never or rarely happened. I think back in the early days, some of the, Betty Ford was one of the first to talk about substance use, alcoholism, literally putting her name, on a building. And it was controversial and, sort of the efforts that she had in destigmatizing, just even getting treatment for that. And so looking back at that and some of the early names, Donny Osmond was one of the first people that we knew. ADAA, he was one of the spokespeople, and that was controversial at the time. And now you have athletes talking about it all the time, and I think to me, it makes me really, really hopeful, especially when you see these sort of experiences in pop culture, and not only talking about mental health, but seeking treatment, and in our seeking the evidence-based types of interventions that we know can help and work. And so I'll take it. There's always going to be sort of the negative aspects of that, but I've certainly felt the shift in the past 10, 15, 20 years, and from a trainee to now, how much more open I think people are in talking about it. Even in my family, I'm from a Portuguese family, and it was much more not spoken about as much. And now I see aunts and uncles and people talking openly about anxiety and depression and family history. Like, oh, that was probably that, back in the day. And so I see it both in the professional realm, but also in the personal realm. And I think that I'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I'm also just thinking in real time as you all are sharing, because this is helpful for context. And just having heard, again, so many people on this podcast, we've talked about that. So Sean Astin was on at one point talking about his mom, Patty Duke, and how transformative that was when she started talking honestly about what she was going through, but also the struggle, because he's seeing things from her public advocacy thing, but also seeing things in the home and trying to reconcile all those things. So I think that context is really, really helpful. But I was also thinking about me being a little bit younger in the work and having the same reaction you're having about people talking more about their mental health struggles or things they've gotten help in, but then also noticing when they talk about that, the engagement's a lot less than when they're talking about their sports or their music. And so always kind of holding that and being like, this is good, because a lot of people are getting help through that, but I'm also thinking there's still a clear distinction where it could have more traction than it does. So there's that on the one hand. Then there's also the other hand of people who are talking, I've written about this in other places, brain hacks for X, Y, and Z, who are just saying whatever they want to say. There's much more attention on that. People are taking that to be actually accurate information. And so this tension. So, and I guess in one sense, I'm also saying I'm glad that things are moving, but I'm still wrestling. I don't know why I'm making it so personal, but wrestling with how to navigate through all of that. So from both of your perspectives, I guess in your public advocacy role and in your profession, how do you enter into that? What do you do with that?
Yeah, well,
not the best question in the world, but it's just
no,
it's kind of a live question.
It's a great insight into it. And if to the first part of what you said, if it helps, being somewhat of a control freak, I manage my own social media. And when you do that, there's back end ways to see what happens with your posts on certain sites like Twitter X and Instagram and others. And one of the things I noticed years ago was when I post on a range of topics because like you, I'm not just mental health. I like my sports. I like my hip hop. I like the other things.
Yeah.
The mental health posts tended on social media to get less reactions from people, less likes, less retweets, or less whatever you're sharing.
Yeah.
But an interesting thing happens if you look in the back end. And this is what really sold me on public advocacy and dissemination direct to consumers who need to hear the messages is you can also see how many people clicked your links that you shared, even if they didn't on the outward side like or share your posts. And it was a striking difference sometimes on the mental health ones on how little attention it got from the front end. But on the back end, I realized I was getting people to click and read the content of these articles that I wanted them to read.
Yeah.
So that gives me hope. Like that's the hopeful side is that, and I suspect that was years ago. It's probably shifted even more where people are a little less hesitant to do so. Although your point is taken, if you're still seeing it with celebrities now and what they get the most traction on, it's still, as we probably hinted at, it's not resolved in the country at all yet.
Yeah.
And then this is what you picked on what Sandy was saying. There's this whole other group of people who have the brain hacks that are wildly popular and go viral, whose content strays from the science. And I'll let Sandy touch that one because I don't know what to do. That's dismaying sometimes.
Yeah, I mean that's the great part about working with kids and teenagers is I think we have to teach them to be good consumers of information. We're in we talked about the state of the world, anti-science in many ways, actively anti-science and pseudoscience and the things that we see. That part of the work I think has to be how do you consume? What do you consume? Where do you get your information? How do you consume it? And asking questions of who's providing that information. And so I talk to parents, I talk to kids all the time in terms of whether it's vaping, whether it's mental health stuff. Where are you getting the information, and do you know how to look for better sources of information? And part of what we do in cognitive behavioral therapy is you look at how thoughts and what we think about affects our mood, affects our behaviors. And so where do we get the content, and how do we filter out and frame some of the information that we're getting so that we're better consumers of that? That's all I got in terms of, and I think having people talk about it and to call out when something is pseudoscience, or to promote or get more creative about how we talk about, effective therapies. It can be kind of boring in terms of how we frame it. I think we need to get better at marketing, and getting someone like a Simon on NBC, or getting, someone who's more dynamic speaking about, these topics. I think that's what we have to do and be better about doing. I think there's a lane for a lot of us, and trying to figure out whether it's, the media facing work or the public policy facing work, but really getting out there and putting forth what we know is the science and the science-based information. Yeah.
What are some of the tips that you give parents and kids in terms of how to make those decisions?
I think it's developmental. Depends on the age of the kids. It depends on, but it starts with caregivers and parents, and sort of I ask about their own modeling. Where do kids learn behaviors? There are times that parents are on their phones. I'm like, hey, can we have a session? Yeah. And for the most part, really talking about the family and how the family views. Is it the news, or is it social media, where they're getting the information? How do they talk about access to it? And do they know what content kids are consuming? And having an honest conversation about it, and putting it out there of what is out there. What is science? What's pseudoscience? How do we find out if something is or isn't? What's the source of it? And just asking questions and being more, we have a phrase in CBT, collaborative empiricism, sort of coming together to ask some questions to see, what it's about. And so that's kind of what we try to do in modeling some of this. Same thing with, I had a conversation with a teen, this was a couple of months ago, about vaping. And like they are bubblegum flavor is not for the adults. They're trying to get kids. So their strategy is to trick you into this is about business and money and making money off of you. And so teaching kids and using almost that strategy to almost as a persuasive, argument to get them to recognize that they're being targeted for financial gain, not because. So it's that kind of stuff, just trying to talk about the information and how it's presented.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you've taken or learned from the kids and the families that's changed how you approach things, either how you communicate it?
Always. Chronically.
So anything you want to share on that? It should be a two-way street when it's healthy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, just how I think, I don't know, that's the best part about working with kids and families, about how honest and authentic and resilient folks are despite the many, 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 many challenges that they face. And I think that people are generally really trying and doing their best. And how do we help them in that endeavor? So I don't know. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I'll come back to you on a specific child example, but there's so many.
Yeah. But that also encourages me too. Because I feel like those are the families and kids who actually feel like you're listening to them.
Yeah.
And who feel like you're working together.
Teens will come in. That's the best part. Also with teenagers, they'll come in, they're outraged and they want to do their own, whether it's the climate or whether it's mental health. This is such a great part about the altruism side of things, that people will come in their own developmental stage and really wanting to act and do things. So they'll come in all the time. Like, did you know that, And so they will often come in with information that I'm not aware of.
Yeah. I guess it shows you what they're paying attention to.
Oh, for sure.
And where you can put an emphasis or address things, all those types of things too.
Yeah.
There's a question that's been burning since you both mentioned it, because you both hinted and said, well, there's some things that concern me. And where, just our mental health conversation. So what are those types of things that still feel frustrating, that still need to move, and how can we actually address those? And Simon, you look like you're ready. You're ready to go on this one.
Everything you're talking about has so many different directions we can go, which is what I appreciate about you addressing these topics on your show. And it's back to your original question: is it a fad or is it a trend? Or I worry sometimes about the attention span in these days, and with everything going on in the world and the country, and the way people digest information these days, how to sustain the good. And the blessing and the curse is the tension moves really quickly. So if something's not so good, we can just hold our breath and stay present, and it like clouds passing in the sky probably will go. The curse is that a lot of the good work we do, if we're not careful, is a bit like sandcastles on the beach. Some other wave of something comes in, or someone comes in, or something happens, and people's attentions collectively pivot away from the stuff and the work you've put in, if we're not careful, and if we don't think judiciously and deliberately about how to support the work we've done, I worry it could be overwhelmed by either something like the brain hacks or the parallel universe that goes on the echo chambers of the internet with messages that in some ways are super effective at reaching the next generation, because that's where they consume their news. And so it's not just the makers of e-cigarettes and other companies that can look at that group. It can be people looking to get follows and attention to that group that we're not so good at. We being my field, I think. We like our offices, and we like the work we do often, and publishing in our scientific journals and conferences where we speak to one another. And this is why I really appreciate what you do. You do that really well. And then as long as I've known you, you've been on this journey to do more. And I think in our field, there's not enough of us, to Sandy's point, that can counter-program to the noise that's there and have scientific voices that are also comfortable speaking to the media or publishing books for kids in a way that's relatable. Sandy should talk about her book that's going to come. It's really cool. But if we don't do that, my worry and my fear is that people will take that space, and they don't need to have the training or credentials or expertise. They just need the platform. And there's more and more platforms to do that.
Yeah.
That's what you saw on my face.
Yeah.
Some version of that.
That's important. Well said. Anything you want to react to? or add?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Simon said, spot on. I worry about AI. I think technology is incredible. I think it could be so helpful. And I see kids sort of interfacing with it in ways that I think are very cool.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the worry about how do we harness that and not have it replace what we know is effective for guiding people when they're, feeling depressed or anxious or what have you. And sort of, I think it's incredible in terms of what the possibilities are. And Simon can speak to that way better than I and his expertise. But, paying attention to the technology and not wholly condemning it outright, but also recognizing that there's a lot of misinformation. Not everybody has ADHD. Not everybody has OCD. Not everybody has #trauma. And so that's the thing that's a pet peeve of mine, that it's sort of watering down the real clinical stuff and making it seem as if, it's much more pervasive or much more diagnosed and things like that. And so I worry about that kind of messaging. I don't know. I think it was somewhere between 60 and 80% of information in this one study was incorrect, about diagnoses. And so, or I think it was 80. If I'm remembering the study, we can look it up. But that's a lot of misinformation, on TikTok or it doesn't even matter, Instagram, wherever it was. And so I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that's where kids are consuming their information. And so I think we need to have messengers who are also out there and doing some of this work. That's the only other piece to piggyback on. Yeah.
Have you all found strategic ways to do that, or partnerships, or even things in the city that have helped to mitigate that a little bit? And as I'm talking, I'm not talking in a very in a way that I would if I was speaking with a bunch of teens. But that like how I guess I'm asking a how question. How does that happen, or how have you seen it happen? Well,
for me, I think it's just we have to enlist our colleagues to understand the implications of this more, and to realize that most of us have, if we're publishing in scientific journals, we have something to say. Yeah. And the expertise, even in people who are just graduates of college, have a level of expertise they don't always give themselves credit for, because they've followed the science. They've got a diploma, which could be useful for people who have less access or less ability to hear from. They may not have mentors in their life. They may not have role models in their community that are as accessible as people with the credentials who can also just speak to people. And I think it's a bit like the more of a movement we have, it can be a thunderclap of momentum to at least wash away some of or blow away some of the inaccurate messaging that's on there. So that's my initial reaction. Always when I give a talk to colleagues on media or social media, I'm always trying to enlist them to join the movement. And people are shy for whatever reasons. And somehow all these experts, there's usually a room full of PhDs or PsyDs or MDs, and yet they worry about saying the wrong thing, and that stops them from then sharing valuable information that they could have to reach people who would listen to them. Yeah. If they're not going to listen to you, who are they going to listen to?
Yeah.
The other piece of that, in addition, I mean, I know we're talking about social media and online, presences. I also think it's important to leave the office and go into the community. And I think you were referencing the Bronx Clergy Task Force and the interfaith. Yep. And I was invited to that by Simon. My first week at Montefiore, he's like, "Hey, do you want to do a talk on adolescent mental health in the Bronx?" And so I arrived in the Bronx a week ago. Sure, let's go. And it was for the Bronx Clergy Task Force, and it was this collection of interfaith leaders from the Bronx who got together monthly to talk about different topics, whether it was mental health or housing or things that were relevant to the communities, and actually leaving the office. And this is something that I was trained to do with, former mentors, Anne-Marie Albano and some others. Whenever we'd get a request to do a talk at a school, at a church, at a health fair, at a community fair, saying yes. And it's a pain. It's hard to leave the office. It's hard to fit it in. It's hard to do all of these things, certainly. And, virtual has made it easier in a lot of ways, but actually stepping out into our communities and, putting, that's a psychologist and they came to, my school or my church or, what have you. And so I think, yes, there's more work to be done in the online sphere and enlisting folks to, put that information out there, but then also walking about the communities in which you work and being a part of them.
Yeah. That's really well said. Yeah.
I don't, it was one of our colleagues in Sandy's clinic was teaching mindfulness at the local food pantry, right? While people were waiting, like, since you're there, and go to them, and help people while waiting anyway, to get a little bit of a little taste of what mental health can do for you in this moment, right? In a way that's relatable,
Yeah.
It's not in a book, and it's not. You're not under a tree in a lotus position practicing your breathing. You're like in the city, in a line, living your life. Can this fit? And if it fits in there and you feel it experientially, you're going to want more of it. And that's what Sandy's also created the Speakers Bureau, where she has local organizations reach out if they need a speaker on a topic. And then she has a bunch of the faculty in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences who are willing to volunteer an hour of their time to do these talks, which is just a great point about we can't expect people to come to us. They're not in the Bronx. When I remember still, as I was getting a taste of hope, I remember walking past our outpatient clinic in our main hospital, the oldest hospital, the Moses Hospital, as part of our health system, is called the Clow Pavilion, and Clow 1 is the outpatient area. And I remember walking down the hall, which is actually decorated by artwork from kids in the Bronx and part of this project with one of Sandy's colleagues called Jenny Seaham. And there was a family walking to another part of the hospital, but going down that hall, and the parents saying to the children, don't go to the end of that hall. That's where the crazy people are. And it broke my heart a bit because that's still needs help. And as Sandy said, depending on your cultural, racial background, I'm from a family where part of my family's background said you don't talk to strangers about your mental health matters. That's what family or religious officials within the faith can do. And people if we don't get out and reach parents and kids, they are missing a golden opportunity to potentially get help and redirect their entire trajectory with the right person at the right time. Yeah. And that's another bit of my downer face. There's still stigma despite all the efforts.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to address. And I love hearing about the Speakers Bureau because it feels like it can address some of those things. But I think it's also a good reminder for those who are doing it to also be able to learn too. Because, in academics, there's that pressure, like, I got to get it right the first time. But to say, no, it's almost not this is an experiment, but it should be iterative in a sense like, okay, I did this. That was helpful. I learned this. I can take that. And so I imagine that's also a helpful learning experience for those who are doing it as well.
Yeah, we had that one, the mindfulness it's called Project Bravo, which is an incredible institution in our community. It's a food bank plus. And a few blocks from where our child clinic is. And so she's going there in a couple of weeks and doing that, distress tolerance as folks stand in line and whatnot. Yeah. And we had someone do it a couple of months ago who had not had a volunteer out. And these are all volunteers. These are people who are giving, very busy folks who are donating an hour, sometimes more of their time. And that's important to name. And this one colleague had said, well, do I need slides? And I was like, no. I said, nope. You're just going to be there, and just talk to folks and share your knowledge. And you can bring a handout or a flyer if it's helpful. And, how would you have a conversation with someone who wants to know about, your area of expertise? And they did it, and they came back and loved it. And, the experience speaks for itself in terms of, being out in the community is its own reward,
Yeah.
And community will tell you when you're off.
You
go to your iterative process. You need someone to say, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Yeah. But that was stupid. Or, I don't understand the thing you just said in the last 5 minutes.
Exactly.
And that makes you think, okay, I'm off point. And then if you have a growth mindset and can say, this is, how do I learn for the next time? Yeah. And you're not perfectionistic, or you don't worry about, the value is, am I trying to reach community? Yeah. And am I going to them? And then the process is ongoing. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I love about the people in the Bronx will tell you if you do community work, whether you're on point or off point. People tell you, even if you don't solicit it. They're
exactly.
Especially when you're not soliciting it. So,
that's great feedback. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of students and trainees who listen to this podcast too. So just hearing those pieces, I think, is also helpful because people are often asking, like, how do I get involved? How do I be engaged? How did you start to navigate these things on the one hand? Although I would say on the other side, there are a lot of students who are doing that at a much higher rate than even I was doing at that stage. And so I think the other question that they often bring up, maybe not even question, but tension point, is will you actually let me do this? Or do you feel like this is coming at the expense of my training? Is that something that you've encountered in any shape or form?
I will say, I've had this thought in terms of, the community service side of things is not going to help you with promotion, at least in any official, right? Major leg, minor leg. It sounds interesting. It sounds great. and sort of little side passion project of how do we make this kind of work count more for things that will ultimately, lead to promotion or making more money or, things that matter in some ways. We're very lucky. We're in a department, our chair, Dr. John Alpert, I think he's so generous with his willingness to allow people to explore their interests and find different ways and sees the whole, the whole person and their roundedness and the importance of their contributions to the community. So I think I'm getting to the point of it comes from the top in terms of the leadership and, how leaders, whether it's a department, whether it's a division, whether it's, in training, whether it's in different spaces. And Simon literally wrote a book on leadership, actually. I don't think you mentioned that on your list. That one just came out about a month ago.
Oh, nice.
We should talk about that.
Yeah.
But how do leaders think about, how mission-driven are we and how do we want our trainees to do that? And so if someone comes with an idea that might not be a traditional, field work or practicum or something, or they have an idea to do something, having them, of course, tie it to their training or to the mission, but being willing to explore and experiment and go for it. So I think that comes from the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when I applied for professor, the person who helps applicants seeking promotion, who reviews our materials from faculty development, Penny Grossman, who's a dear, looked at my materials and found a way to include all my social media work in my application process for professor.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's a different world. And I think to answer your question, if we had a student that said, I want to get involved, I want to try to support them in that, not at the sacrifice of what we think are the competencies they need to get, but in addition to. And then I think what counts for associate professor, national or international reputation? Well, if you're working with on a large platform, reaching people, if I had an intern who wanted to create a podcast or create a channel, and it was evidence-based but relatable, because I'm less and less relatable to certain generations of folks, I'm all for that. That's the exact thing I referenced earlier. We need more voices, and we need the right voice to read. There's different locks for different keys for different locks, and we need different people to do that work.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you a lot of people listening are going to feel very encouraged by that, by hearing you all say that, especially as leaders in the field. And it's really important. I mean, I can say personally that's been the case. That's the reason this podcast exists. I mean, we're in the Yale teaching studio, so inherently you can see the value that's being placed in it, but it's necessary.
And would you say along the way of your this episode after episode of the podcast, if you were to go back and look at the early ones, have you learned lessons from how you did things in the beginning?
It's a great question.
Yes.
Yeah.
And others have shared that with me. Yeah. Again,
are they from the Bronx and they told you?
I'll have to find out. But I mean, in enduring ways too. I mean, people have been like, oh, I've listened to some of the recent ones and things have really, really gotten good. And I'm like, okay.
Thank you.
I think I know where you're going with that. Yes, there has been improvement. But yeah, I've definitely learned.
So that,
from process, just
and
learning how to have
that
conversations.
Is, right?
Yeah. And there's topics too. I mean, so many things that I can actually speak on now that I could not speak on 5 years ago because I wasn't in these conversations.
Right. And I was going to say, I try to model fallibility all the time for the students.
Intentionally or unintentionally, I do
it for the students.
and for students listening, the point you made is what I was hoping you would say, which is you don't get to this point without the other points before it. Yeah. Right. And today I'll listen to this and I'll say, I can't believe I said that instead of this. Or how many times did I say or like or whatever I was doing? And for the next one, it'll be a step closer.
Yeah.
And I think what paralyzes people sometimes is that worry that it's not going to be just right.
Yeah.
And nothing is what's just right these days. Back to your first question.
Yeah. I know so many times the episodes I've been like, that one didn't go so well. And then someone will email me and be like, that was exactly what I needed to hear.
Isn't that amazing?
I'm like, okay. Yep, let me step back and not try and make something fit how I think it should fit.
Yeah.
And maybe hold lightly the stories our mind tells us about what's right or wrong or good or bad.
Yeah.
I had the same thing with one of the books I published. I was hesitant about the final product, and I wasn't sure. And there was an opt-out way to do it. And I remember being really tempted to take the opt-out. And I ultimately, because it was with the co-author, we went for it. And it's turned out to be the best-selling of my books.
Yeah.
People responded to it in ways that I wouldn't have thought, but I had my own critic evaluating it and speaking on behalf of the world or whoever's reading it, and it was false.
Yeah.
So for people that are listening that may have ideas and hesitations, it's always important, as Sandy said, to be CBT, to be a scientist with what you're doing, and then create an experiment where you can test out whether it's fact or just a thought.
Yeah. Really well said. I make this joke a lot, but I always tell people to pause and actually rewind too.
Yeah, that's right.
There's so much good information that you all are sharing too. And I think, again, people hear it in different ways, but it's helpful to hear it again and again, and to hear it from people at your stature, and to hear about the bumps along the way. So yeah, really well said.
Feel a whole other episode with those.
Oh my goodness, so many bumps.
That may need to happen at some point.
Just
I'm
last
not saying it has to be you all to pull out all the bumps that you've had, but
I have a recent one that, I sort of question, like, okay, I said that in a group, and I run a co-lead with an intern, a college readiness group. It's part of our emerging adult program, and it's the group I wish I had when I was getting ready for college, and sort of helping kids, juniors, seniors in high school get ready to go to college. And we talk about time management. We talk about, so this was the second group, and this was a new member of the group, and she was drinking water, and she sort of choked a little bit, and she's coughing. And we're like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed." And I said, "Oh, well, I was in a meeting with the chair of my department. This was a few years ago when he started, and I was coughing, and snot came out of my nose." Oh my gosh. So, and I say this story because, I was like, "You got a story? I got a more embarrassing one." So now I've said it to even more people. And here we are, right? And she's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yes." And so, I think to the extent that, we can tell these stories and put them out there. We're human, right?
Yeah. People need to remember that. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna pivot a little bit, because something you both said earlier is intriguing me. Because it's the same realm of, like, how do we actually get out into community? But you made a comment about people are like, "Oh, that's a psychologist in community." So I think that's also important. And I'd like to just press and see, how do people react to you when they find out what you do? I assume that you share what you do, but there may be instances where you kind of, that can be maybe I'm talking too much about myself now. There are times when I've been on planes.
Oh yeah, airplanes.
And I'm like, should I say what I do or should I not? Because if I do, that's now going to be, if it's a long flight, it's a 3-hour conversation because there's so many questions. But at the same time, sometimes that's helpful. I think I was flying out to like a remote area in Washington State, and I had a veteran sitting next to me who actually just had a lot of experience that she had gone through, and had also developed like a fear of heights. So the fact that I divulged that actually allowed her to kind of talk through that and helped calm her down as the flight was landing. So again, I could have been selfish in that moment, but okay. I'm going on about my own self, but
no.
Just to throw it out there.
That's the example that came to mind was airplanes.
Really?
You're locked in place. I think by and large, same airplanes. I'm like, do I? Shouldn't I? Particularly as a child, I'll say a child psychologist typically. I think people will often react very positively and, wow, that's amazing work that you do. I think there's a general positive vibe. And then I have a nephew or I have a, which can be complicated. Yeah. And when I'm in my better graces, I roll with it and I don't mind. And I think it's what a sort of privilege that people feel comfortable just with that title to think that, and hopefully we are actually willing and able and to listen and, obviously with boundaries, hopefully, and not always. And I sat next to on an airplane. This was forever ago. I don't remember if it was J. Crew or LL Bean. And this guy pulls out and he's like, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." One of his papers. So I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And it was khaki pants. And I said, "That's a lot of information for khaki pants." And he goes, I'm a designer for whatever this company was. Like, this is intriguing. And so I kept asking all these questions and I became the person. And so I was always mindful. I wonder, I hope he's doing well, Mr. Khaki Pants guy. But I was like, I didn't recognize that he's measuring the inseam and he's, it was very cool. And so I had a positive affiliation with that too. I think in general, positively, and I think it's important to sort of hold that. And we're human also and, want to rest on planes and, maybe I don't always share it as openly.
Yeah. That's honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have both perspectives now too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I had my initial reaction was I dichotomized it for a moment because I think it can tip either way. In my experience, I've certainly shared your experiences where I say I'm a psychologist and it seems to open the door for people to feel comfortable sharing something. Yeah. Or ask. Sometimes people ask, sometimes they don't. But and depending on, as Sandy said, we're fallible, we're human. I'm not always at 100%, depending on the context and whether I'm expecting something or not. So, but it's also, I think, a real part of my values is trying to help. It's back to reaching people in places I wouldn't normally expect to meet them.
Yeah.
And so if it's on a plane, sometimes those have turned into really lovely conversations. Other times I think you say you're a psychologist, like at a social event where it's not other psychologists,
Yeah.
and there's a pause, and then either, so can you read my mind?
Yep.
Or I gotta go do something, and they are out, and then the rest of the evening they're watching. As the churning of social networks go, they're keeping. You can just see they don't want to have. I am damned from. They don't want to be in my orbit. They don't want me to somehow like pull from their minds whatever
Are you
they're
analyzing me?
Yeah, are you analyzing me?
Yeah.
Can you read my mind?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, and it's hard to predict
Yeah.
which way it's gonna go.
Yeah.
So that's again, and there's obviously people in between, but I think that's been my experience. It really, I can remember instances of both.
Yeah. I'm laughing because it's familiar.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I will say, I feel really proud to be a psychologist.
Okay. Yeah.
And, I love working at Montefiore. Simon knows this. And because we're so mission driven and it's about sort of the clinical work and working with patients, sure, but it's about teaching and training like we talked about, but it's also being part of something bigger. And in Montefiore's example, like an institution that is really part of its community and stuff. And so I don't hold back. I feel very proud of it. I'm proud of it in ways that I think I've sort of landed in the right spot in my life, and it feels good and fulfilling.
Yeah.
Plus or minus a meeting.
Yeah.
Plus or minus an administrative meeting.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. I do have a potentially dangerous question.
Uh-oh.
What frustrates you, if anything, about being a psychologist? And if nothing frustrates you, then maybe I'll let you say.
Do you want it alphabetically, chronologically?
Let me pause there.
You heard my chronic rage comment, right?
So I think that's not just for students listening, but that's healthy for people to actually
Oh, yeah.
see the whole picture.
Do you want to jump in? I can jump in. Yeah.
I don't even think it's dangerous.
No, I think it's honest.
Yeah, again, it's back to like if you're human, you're going to have human emotions, and if you're working, I didn't know which aspect of being a psychologist you're referring to, like working with patients, working in a system, working in the Bronx. Working with colleagues, working in associations, there's frustrations. The blessing and the curse of, I think, of living a full life is you get really, really amazing, wonderful gifts, and then you have to embrace the idea that part of the other side of the full life is to deal with the inevitable frustrations that come along the way. And often the frustrations to me that's an emotion. That to me, I always link with I've set a bar that's just a little bit further than I'm capable of in the moment, or with a person or with a patient. And if they're frustrated, I usually tell them, I treat frustration as the idea that maybe there's just something a little bit out of reach. Like when my kids were young and they wanted applesauce, and it was on the counter, and they couldn't reach the counter, and they were looking at it, and they're getting more and more frustrated because they're hungry. Frustration to me is that it's like, what am I hungry for? What's the thing that I want either out of this person or this patient or this project we're working on? And it's not there yet. So there's, in today's healthcare, especially in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of pressure financially on institutions, and a lot of initiatives we're trying to do take a lot more effort to come to fruition. So as a person that's invested in the division of psychology, where I want the psychologists in the department to be reinforced and rewarded for their efforts and to support programs and initiatives that we have. And I'm in a relatively newer role of technology to get new initiatives launched these days requires many, many more checks and balances and approvals, which can be frustrating in terms of the delay it takes and in terms of seeing an opportunity. And I'll say just a specific example in the technology space, we have an opportunity to bring cutting edge technology, augmented reality on a platform that helps patients face their fears with avatars that can be brought into our space. And the person that's developed it is willing to give us the platform to use for free. But to use a platform that touches patient care in a hospital responsibly so requires a lot of different people to say yes. And that can take weeks to months these days to get put into place. Meanwhile, our patients in the Bronx who are often on the short end of the stick when it comes to getting the services they deserve are waiting.
Yeah.
So that's just one.
Yeah. It's an important one.
I mean, Simon said it so well. Trying to use frustration as we would any emotion, right? In terms of whether it's anxiety or anger, none of that is bad or dangerous necessarily. And sort of trying to appreciate what the frustrations are. There's so many daily, clinically, individually, my own stuff. Nothing too out of sorts. I think the thing that, as a psychologist, frustrates me the most is more the systemic, similar to what Simon is saying, or the structural barriers that get in the way, or like the injustices, those kinds of things that are a little bit harder to move or harder to reach. I'm good. Like, I think for me personally, I feel very good, and we have this responsibility in these roles that we're representing others, and that's the part, I think, the obligation, the responsibility of having a leadership role is that sort of wanting to move the needle further for folks who can't or don't have as much of a voice or aren't at the table, whether it's trainees, whether it's the Bronx community, whether it's these other folks. And so that's what frustrates me when I could see it. It should be easier. and whether it's bureaucracies or, someone else's intentions or capitalism or you name it, that's the stuff that really gets me frustrated and then bordering into anger and rage, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And, and I think that's the piece, right, of leadership and or having a seat at the table and creating more seats at the table or making a longer table or, all the stuff that we try to do. But that's the trying to sort of solve those types of puzzles can be frustrating.
That's honest. I mean, at the same time, you've also talked about what you try to do with it too and trying to create. I mean, I'm thinking about your kids too. I mean, some kids would go and get something to stand on. It might not be safe, but there are things that we inherently do to try and navigate. And I think that's an important piece to bring up as well. We don't have to just sit in the frustration.
In fact, if you use it well, all emotions, I think, have an adaptive purpose. You just have to figure out what it's asking me to do rather than let it overwhelm you. Right? And if you're not careful, it can overwhelm you and then that can spiral. But if you actually do what you said and say, okay, what's it driving me to do? You can be quite creative.
That's true. Yeah.
In the moment, and actually maybe inspired to Sandy's frustration / rage.
It's a New
can
Jersey,
impact
New
the
Jersey.
system. New Jersey rage can come out, and she'll get
Particular
things
brand.
done.
It's a particular brand.
But because of that, she'll move things that I couldn't because of my Canadian passivism.
We balance each other well.
I can see that. Yeah.
So you need a yin for a yang, right?
Yeah.
And we learn from each other.
Yeah.
And that's obviously Sandy's quite capable and flexible in her range of reactions and tools. But the utility of it that you pointed out is super important. Emotions aren't negative. The dangerous stuff, the dangerous question is actually a very helpful one for your listeners to hear, which is the pain points that we have in our life could be a calling for action.
Yeah.
Which I admire a lot about what you that's where you synthesize things really well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think going back to the other side of sort of trying to be chronically hopeful also. And one of my favorite quotes, I have it hanging in my apartment, is hope is a discipline.
Oh, wow.
And that we have to work at it. And I think it's attributable to Mariam Kambe, I think is the name. And that we have to work at it. And hope, and even cognitive behavioral therapy has become an interest of mine in terms of the kind of the roll your sleeves up kind of hope, not the wish fulfillment, but how do we have the agency to sort of, do we set these goals and then do we have the agency and sort of can we see the pathways? And those tend to be like the functions of hope. And so I try to go back there. It's like, okay, where are the pathways? And there's a block, and how do we find a different pathway?
Yeah.
And we've seen hope actually as a mechanism in cognitive behavioral therapy too, as sort of connected to outcome. And can we create that not only in our patients, but in ourselves? And so what do I need to work at to sort of sustain, maintain, get back to a place where I'm overcoming the frustration or I'm able to do something about it?
Love that.
Yeah, that's great.
So in a similar vein, the importance of gratitude, I think, is something that I try to pay attention to offset the frustrations or the challenges in life. And we, as a family, we started, I think sometime in the pandemic, we have what's called the gratitude game at dinner.
Nice.
Everyone who's at the table has to participate. So usually it's the four of us, 2 kids and my wife and I. But if grandparents or friends are visiting, you participate. And the gist of the game, it's age adjusted, is to say one thing that you're grateful for from each of the other people at the table. One act of loving kindness that you did that day for someone else. One thing you're working on to better yourself. And then we've introduced more recently one thing you're proud of in someone else at the table. And that it's really remarkable. Again, there's a lot of research from positive psychology on the role that gratitude can play pro-socially with others. But internally, it's really struck me how remarkably it can turn what's been a challenging day or even a challenging interaction just 5 minutes earlier when we have to put it aside and do the game, how it just opens up a whole new avenue of call it hope or positivity and can offset a lot of the stress and baggage we carry with us. So I think gratitude's a great antidote for a lot of life's frustrations or work challenges these days as well.
I mean, it sounds so simple, but I think we take it so for granted too. I mean, even actually, as you're both talking and bringing so many things back to mind too, this takes me back to actually high school. I think this must have been something that came up in a church setting or something like that, where they encouraged us to like think about things we were grateful for each night. So I don't know why I decided to do this, but I did it for maybe a year. I was going to do it, list a number of things about the age I was. It was actually very annoying at the beginning. Because I might have been like 17. I was like, I don't want to think about 17 things. But it got easier over time. And to your point, I feel like it also shifted my mindset. Like from number one, it's like getting to this place of feeling angst. And by 16, 17, feeling a little bit lighter. So I mean, all those types of things. And even, I don't know if my wife will want me to share this, but we have a gratitude jar at the dinner table. Unfortunately, I have been one of the ones who hasn't put in as much as I should. So I'm telling on myself right now. But again, same type of thing. I think it's so important. And then the hope piece too, I was thinking back, again, I don't know why I'm in such a reflective mode, but I remember being at Montefiore during the sabbatical and hearing about this aspect of hope. And I was thinking, wow, I don't remember hearing about this in psychological settings before. And it wasn't just that it came up, it was the way that you all were talking about it and trying to integrate it. And then even having conversations about like, how does hope impact how we think? How does it impact the brain? So kind of tying all these pieces together. So yeah, you're bringing a lot back.
I believe that original quote actually came from someone who works in prison reform. And so, if you need hope somewhere, thinking about that aspect of needing to keep working at it.
Yeah.
You can go back to the gratitude jar anytime you want. It's a process. We had brought a guy, Robert Emmons, who has a whole lab on gratitude out in California to our grand rounds last year, I think. And he has a series of self-help books. And what really struck me, outside of the science, which is pretty sound, is how it's really just it's a process and a commitment to practice. And you by definition fall off. We all do. Yep. And it's the commitment part is returning to the process again. And then when you're frustrated, just putting a thing in the jar, it starts to build a momentum, which I think it's a great metaphor and a great physical cue for you to do.
Yeah.
I was going to say that we have the alternative is you can find this online. There's a gag gift I've given to a colleague, which is a jar of F's. Have you seen that?
I have not.
It's literally the F word and carved out of wood, about a miniature, about 100 of them in the jar with this beautiful made up note about you only have so many F's to give in life.
Oh, wow.
And so you should be really judicious and thoughtful. Is this the thing if I had to physically take one out and drop it, is this worth one of these precious F's? And I thought it was brilliant. And the note is quoting Buddha, which is like, it's a joke, but it's a wonderful version of, is this the thing that's going to get me?
Yeah.
Or can I find a way to detach from it?
That's a helpful mental exercise.
I think I know the colleague.
If
not, I might need to get it for that colleague.
Yeah. And we all have those moments.
Oh, for sure.
In one way or the other.
Yeah.
For sure.
But it just helps. I mean, because it puts things in context too, which is huge. Yeah.
I think that's what we need these days. I think, be it through psychology or neuroscience, or you haven't touched on spirituality, and Sandy mentioned it with the clergy. It's just ways to reach people in meaningful avenues for them is so important.
Yeah, meeting them where they are, which is huge. Yeah, which to your credit, you did with me, 8 years ago when we first met. Yeah. So just in terms of, as a psychologist, me and neuroscientist, and having that common ground and speaking you'll laugh at this. So speaking my language in a sense, maybe not with all the neuroscience terms, but just as a human being. So
well, I appreciate that. And yeah, and I teased you earlier before we went on about how that's the only thing on your CV I could really pick out. I can't do the neurobiology of substance use or nicotine dependence, but I found on your CV the one thing that really gravitated to me, which was this panel you had done at Emory on God and faith and mental health in the community. And I thought, this gentleman is using the science for the right reasons and pulling together these areas that need to talk to one another. So that was super impressive 8 years ago.
Yeah. Well, your feedback was encouraging because I think I mentioned I was also just kind of stepping into that and not knowing where things would go. I didn't have my feet set. So there was a lot of walking it out in real time too, which I think it's important to acknowledge because as you mentioned earlier, it's a process and you can't get to here without going through those initial phases too, and getting feedback, whether it's from folks in the Bronx or elsewhere. So at the risk, because we've gotten to hope, which is important. The next question I'm going to ask at the risk of not from taking us away from that, but I think it's also helpful for people as we're kind of tying things up to also know what misconceptions about psychology are out there, what irk you, because in a sense, as people are listening, they're hearing from the experts and this is their opportunity to kind of separate those two. Is there anything that really comes to mind that you want listeners to really grasp in terms of what is in the general ethos is really not accurate to what you all do in the field or what the field represents? And it's maybe too many.
The one thing the first thing that stood out, I'm sure there'll be more that follow, and Sandy, I'm sure will contribute, was I think how there's a lot of emphasis on television and the varying channels on how therapy works. And even with CBT, I think people grasp elements of it and then run with it, and they can lose the science behind it.
Okay.
And I think the misperception that I would see is that still, to some degree, people have this like idea that there's like a light bulb moment where things, the light bulb comes on. There's a catharsis and people's lives change. And the truth of it, as I've experienced, is I don't know if I've ever had that light bulb moment with anyone. What I have had was for people who are willing to put in the work. It's work and effort and having a willingness to change something about how they're approaching their lives. If you get that, I'm going to either change how I think or change what I do or both. And I'm willing to work with someone with expertise on how to teach me skills to help augment that new way of approaching life. You incrementally and systematically start to see people move from A to Z. But it's a bit like, I think, like Celebrity or these one-hit wonders that really weren't. Like, you missed the behind the scenes. The Addy show was a hit not because of what happens today or this year, but because of all the things that are behind the scenes that people do. And I think sometimes in the interest of grabbing people's attention, the media can portray it unlike that. And then people get the idea that, well, I've seen you now for 3 sessions. Shouldn't I have fixed all my stuff? There's an impatience along with the short attention span of how many sessions is this going to take? And the truth is it's more like a sequential, incremental process. It takes a lot of work and willingness.
Yeah, that's a really helpful reminder.
That's one of the things I'd say.
Yeah, I think I was going to say similar in terms of the therapy and the therapy process, whether with children, more people, more problems in terms of trying to get, family in the room and really engaging families to do the work. And if you're able to do that and think creatively about how to do that, children rarely self-refer. And so how do we get creative around engaging them? And that's the best part, I think, of really trying to distill and bring skills to practice and do it in ways that are fun and creative to bring kids on board, I think. And it's still work, and it takes more work. And so I would love, I would love insurance and funders to catch up to the work in terms of that's being done and the amount of time it takes for, whether it's children and families, whether it's the more high-risk type of cases and things like that. So that's one part. The other, I was going to say, I had a thought and I think I lost it.
It may come back.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll swim around again.
Yeah. Yeah, I lost hold on. I don't want to pause too long.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
But I mean, even both of those I think are helpful because the nature of this whole, and I didn't anticipate this, but I should have, the nature of our whole conversation is really holistic. and tying on all these different pieces so that people can
Oh,
really
I got it.
It came back?
Thought. Yes,
Yeah.
see, there it is.
Well done.
I think it's important to say that, we talk about diagnoses and pathology, which are real, right? If we can real diagnosable issues, and people are dealing with a lot of struggles. I think a misconception is that it's sometimes the fault of the individual when, there are so many determinants of health that, if we talk about burnout, someone's burnt out at their job, fix your burnout, take a self-care day, that kind of thing. Well, how about the system and the structure and the expectations and the capitalism and the stuff that sort of the system is built against sometimes the individual. Same thing with, racism, sexism, the ills of our society. For our most vulnerable and our most marginalized, it's like, well, just, do these skills and you'll feel better. We know that we can teach people skills to sort of manage the day, but we also need to operate at the level of the ills of our society that sort of are barriers to good health and good mental well-being. And so the balance of, yes, I think we can offer a lot in our therapies, and also recognizing that we have all of these societal, structural, systemic aspects that really need to change if we want to promote well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really well said. So important. And people can pause there too. Because that's, again, all the things you're saying are so important, but it's so easy to lose sight of them so quickly. So just really, and not putting blame. We could have had a whole 3-hour conversation.
Well, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So the hour has gone fast, if you can believe it or not. But I do want to leave people, and I'm trying to think about the best way to do this, because one, I didn't acknowledge it, but psychology is a huge field. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about all the different types of psychology, even whether it's organizational psychology or aspects of criminal justice, all these pieces. So without being able to distill all of that, but then also thinking if there's things that you want listeners to take from this conversation in terms of getting back to this original question of our relationship with mental health as a society, what are takeaways that people can, their relationship with, what's the best way to say it? Not with psychology, but things from psychology that people should avail themselves to, that people maybe are not availing themselves to as much as they could. And that's not a small question. I will acknowledge that.
Yeah.
My head, unless you want to jump in, Sandy, goes to if there's a take-home message, which I'm hoping people will hear, is that if I'm trying to sew together our varying lines of discussion, is that this is a tough world we're living in right now, and it's easy, if we're not careful, to personalize this, or even worse, to have people tell us it's our fault or our responsibility as an individual, or to pathologize what's happening for us, or to still, unfortunately, believe or be told that mental health is a sign of weakness or deficiency in some way, or to feel alone because you can't see this stuff. And so the take-home, tying it together to me, is to hopefully glean from this that there are people in the field like ours, and I include you in this, Nee, that are trying our best to dispel those myths, and they're simply not true. We didn't touch on this, but mental health, Sandy sort of talked about with kids. I think it's a common challenge. If you take diagnoses and just broaden it to people who aren't quite diagnosable but struggling with mental health issues.
Yeah.
I think the stat is 1 in 2. Right? And a colleague of ours, Steve Hayes, has dispelled that, and he says it's 1 in 1 these days. It's 1 in 1. Who doesn't have something?
Yeah.
So the bigger question is to then figure out, for me, what do I need to get connected? Is it through social media, and then who? Is it through self-help resources, and then which? Is it through a local person in a faith in the community? Is it researching, knowing where to find clinical psychologists in my age or in my whatever I'm struggling with to help? And the blessing and the curse of the internet is that stuff is out there if you can find it. Yeah. But that's, I think, the big thing for me is to recognize we all struggle, and there are more and more good treatments available. You just have to be patient and judicious in the process of finding the right match.
Yeah, really well said.
Yeah, to piggyback, I think, we're examples of that in some ways. Our friendship, and to borrow, you can't go wrong borrowing from Mr. Rogers, right? I'm a kid person.
Yep.
Find the helpers, find your people, find your community. I think there's so much, whether diagnosable or not, to work on and to do, and there's a lot of work to be done. And so I think finding the people who you align with, who share your values, and find your could be different communities, in terms of how do you manage your own health, mental health. Is it sports or community activism or faith-based groups or different aspects of sort of finding your people. And trainees ask for advice all the time. And, find people who care about you. Find people who are going to help you in your professional development, in your education. I always had coaches, and I would love to go to the library, and I love librarians. And so, there's so many people who can help us sort of live as rich and meaningful lives and stuff. And so it's a matter of finding good connections professionally and as friends. And so that's sort of the take home message, is sort of finding your people.
Yeah. No, really well said, and appropriate in this context as well. So I'm grateful that you all came and joined the podcast. I will divulge that I wasn't sure if it was going to work, just scheduling wise, not for lack of interest, but just knowing who you all are. So yeah. And this is, you've probably heard as we've been talking, this is very full circle for me, thinking back to when I kind of started these conversations, and you all have been there since the beginning and seen the growth and iteration and evolution, as it were. So I'm glad that listeners, that you all were able to get a little bit of this as well, and appreciate the work that you all are continuing to do.
Yeah, back at you. I think particularly, I think as Simon said, you and how openly you talk in terms of faith and neuroscience and doing this important work. Not a lot of people, and still are not doing that. And so I'm grateful to you, for the work that you do on that front, because that's important to me and to us. And so it feels great to be here with you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for that encouragement.
I would say two things. One is you now have something for your grateful jar.
That's true. I'm going to write it tonight.
Tell
Two things. A Simon and a Sandy.
And you expressed it on the
air.
show. So
that's right.
That's accountability.
That's right. And two is just to reiterate what Sandy said. This was much less a formal presentation to me as reconnecting with a good soul that's important to both of us, right? And it's a pleasure to. The scheduling is a challenge for all of us, not just the two of us, the three of us. And it's such a treat to come and see and to follow your career and follow the great work you're doing. And you're really, in a lot of ways, an inspiration, because you're walking the talk when it comes to the things we talked about here, pulling strings together in a way that I think is very remarkable and powerful. So I appreciate the time, but I also appreciate you as a person.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's definitely mutual, which I'm sure listeners can tell just hearing our conversation. So
now, and Sandy will rage at
something. Get back in the car. Get out of my way.
It's all appropriate and effective at times.
Mostly. Mostly.
Excellent.